Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 275 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. Brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com. All right, I'm your host, Anthony Renna. The show notes are located at ContinueFit.com. It's also where you can find out more about my book, Be Like the Best, and the Be Like the Best workbook. The book consists of 50 interviews with top fitness pros, and after each interview is a Be Like. Be Like is just an action step or a challenge that will help you be like the best. Go to ContinueFit.com to check out more information. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about trap bar deadlifts for adults, why he doesn't like them, new thoughts on the sled, something he went over at his winter seminar, and an article he wrote more about the research. For the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment, I'm on with Alwyn Cosgrove to talk about strategies for client retention, some of the things they've been doing at Results Fitness. For the Functional Movement System segment, I got on Lee Burton, the co-founder of the Functional Movement Screen. He's on to start a two-part series on changes to the Functional Movement Screen, and today he's going to talk about the Rotary Stability Screen changes. We're also starting a 4-part special series with DVRT and the Ultimate Sandbag founder, Josh Henkin. He's going to talk about multi-planar training. Today he talks about progressive overload and planes of motion. For the Train Heroic data-driven coaching segment, Adam Doughty talks to Tim Robinson about training frequency for muscle growth. Check out trainheroic.com to start your free 14-day trial. Let them know I sent you. You'll save 10% off the first year of the Train Heroic Pro or Elite editions. For the BodyByBoyleOnline.com, hit the gym with the Strength Coach segment. I got on Todd Bumgardner. Todd is the co-founder of Strength Action and Beyond Strength Performance. He's also the author of a new book, Let the First Rep Suck. I got a copy of it, and I'm started about a quarter way through, so I interviewed him about it. We spoke all about the book, including what the life cycle of a client is, 3 main reasons people hire a fitness coach, 3 pillars of fitness coaching. And so within this, he just weaves this whole kind of an art of coaching idea. And really, it's kind of funny. We have Alwyn talking about retention today, but it's a lot of retention ideas or philosophy as well. So many takeaways from this book, and which is so great because all the proceeds of the sales in February are going to a great cause for one of his young clients, which we'll talk all about. So get this book, get it in February. All the proceeds go to a great cause. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try it out 3 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. He doesn't always go to work every day because he might be sick, but he's on the forum. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you? I've missed more work in the last 4 days than I think I've missed in the last 4 years. So
it's crazy.
That's not a fake cough that I threw in. But yeah, it's amazing. I've never been kind of down and out sick like I am right now.
Yeah, I don't remember it either in our 15 years of hanging out. Coach, let's just talk about we just passed the winter seminar. I'm excited I wasn't able to make it. We're going to have those up on Body by Boyle Online over time. And Ray McCarthy had a question about the sled, and he said you mentioned briefly about moving past sleds when kids get too strong. I have a few who start sliding feet when we keep the number of steps or reps low. You mentioned something about positional isometrics in the same force vector. Can you expand on that? So yeah, we just wanted you to kind of, what are you thinking with this stuff?
Well, it was interesting. I listened to a podcast the other day with a guy named Alex Natera, who I believe is an AFL, Australian football strength and conditioning coach. And he was talking about the idea that the strength that really matters in sprinting is at that point of ground contact, which actually is not, it's like very little hip flexion or knee flexion. Do you know what I mean? When your foot hits the ground, your leg is almost straight. So he was talking about the idea of positional isometrics. And they were doing stuff, I think, sort of standing in the rack, trying to basically imagine trying to one leg back squat the weight out of the rack, knowing that the weight is too heavy. Do you know what I mean? So if you were standing, almost having finished your squat, and you were kind of pushing up against the bar. And that was kind of the idea that I had. And the funny thing is that I said that on the forum. Ray kind of caught on, or latched on to that little. That was just sort of one of my like random atoms banging around. It's nothing that we've done yet. I don't know if it's something that we'd even do because I still have sort of we got a couple questions on the forum just about isometrics in general, and I don't know where I stand. Nobody has. I always guess I need somebody to really sway me, and nobody's really swayed me. Nobody's really said, "Hey, this is it. This is why it works. This is what you need to do." But I will say it makes me think, which is a good thing. But I don't know if I'm ready to say, okay, we're going to put positional isometrics into our program, because I still think then you kind of get into that focus on the minutia thing, which I want to stay away from.
Absolutely. What about, in terms of the certified functional strength coach progression list? Sometimes there's, 6 or 7 variations within that one section. You think eventually that could be where you place it.
I don't know. Like I said, I think some of it is, I think as we talked about with everything, some of it is the vetting process. Okay, let's try it and see. And it might be, there's some simple logistical things that come into my head. Is it a good idea to just load a sled up with a shitload of weight and just stick it in the middle of the room and tell people to push against it? I don't know. It doesn't seem like a great idea to me, because then we're constantly stripping weight on and off that sled to reuse it. And could you just do the same thing, with like a really hard wall drill type of action, having somebody trying to push the wall down? Because one of my issues with isometrics in general is volition, in the sense that I think maybe some of these really kind of maximal isometric efforts would be great if you have someone, like people talk about like mid-thigh pull kind of stuff, put a bar in the rack, under the pins and try to pull it up as hard as you can. I worry about 2 things. I worry that someone can hurt themselves when they try that hard to pull against an immovable object. I've seen people, even in squatting situations where they're really struggling to squat a really, really heavy weight, I've seen people blow blood vessels in their eyes. You know what I mean? I've seen some stuff that's not pretty. And I do think that in these kind of maximal level isometric contractions, there are chances for legitimate muscle ruptures, because you're really asking that muscle to contract as hard as it can in a shortened state. Then the flip side of that is, do you get someone who gives you the kind of effort that you really need? So I just don't know if I'm totally on board. I probably shouldn't even have said it. It's one of those things that I shouldn't have thrown out there, because this is what happens: is somebody latches on to like the little piece of the minutia and thinks that maybe Mike was tipping off the next big thing here. Yeah. And that's what I wasn't doing.
Yeah.
I was not tipping the next big thing.
An old retired sled and put it in a corner somewhere with a bunch of weight that you're not using anymore, and never have to do it again. But yeah, I get it, and I understand, because I think too the isometrics, one thing is it's hard to tell what effort somebody's given. Like you said, then is it enough, right?
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like what's enough? What's too much? Do you get, it's one of the things, and this is what I worry about. If you take this certain kind of overachiever type and say, okay, press against the immovable object as hard as you can, that's the person who pulls a muscle or blows a blood vessel or whatever it is. And then somebody else maybe gives you 60, 70% of, their maximum contraction. I don't know how we even rate that. So that's kind of my issue. I don't think I think it's, like I said, I should have probably just not said it, but
yeah.
Well.
You gotta watch what you say. Let's talk about Ray. I got a question. Ray Tucker had a question about trap bar deadlift for older clients. And what clarified it later because Elspeth had a really good response to the whole thing. What is older to you? She was assuming it was 60 and over. He said it was 45 and older. And then you kind of came in and defined what you felt like was, you define older as anyone no longer competing. So if you're no longer playing a sport, healthy and quality life become priority number one. So there's no 40 plus or 60 plus, et cetera. But I just, you guys, you're not doing them. You prefer to do kettlebell deadlift and dumbbell deadlifts to the trap bar for older clients. If they get strong enough where the kettlebells or dumbbells aren't enough, then you go unilateral. So I just wonder, to me, the trap bar is it's not that it's foolproof, but it certainly is as opposed to the dumbbell deadlift. The trap bar, it's almost like, wow, yeah, somebody gets that pretty quickly. And you have some really good coaches there. You guys are always working on coaching. I kind of surprised that you wouldn't, and I know you're a logistic piece, but even still, you have a lot of really good. I think even with your clients, you have certain clients that get it.
The problem that we get into, to me, is the slippery slope thing. Like, what do these adults need in their life? Do they need a 315 deadlift?
Why does it have to be 315 though? Why can't it just be their body weight?
It ends up like when you start doing that, it becomes a contest. It always does. It always has. It always will. Like, I can remember giving Brendan Rierick a hard time about it because he had a group of guy clients from Reading that I knew they were all a little bit younger than me. And they'd always like, yeah, Friday's deadlift day because you're not in early on Friday morning. You're not in at 6 on Friday, so we can deadlift. And the problem is eventually somebody always gets hurt. Always. And they always get hurt because they want to lift more weight than they can. And they want to get hurt because they get into that, like, let's try this thing, And so I'm kind of like, I just look at it and think, what's the need? Is there really a need for maximum strength beyond, like, if I get someone who can, let's just say dumbbell deadlift, 120-pound dumbbell, we put them up on 6-inch boxes. I put the video up there and they bang out 10. So they can lift 120 pounds from a position, like mid-calf 10 times. How much do they really need to be able to do for their sort of activities of daily living? And would that not be better served in the real world with them, being able to one leg SLDL, a 60-pound dumbbell? Because that's my thing. Like, I always look at, people always come back to like, oh, well, people are going to have to pick up kids. And I'm like, yeah, but nothing we're going to have to pick up in life is going to come close to 120 pounds. You know what I mean? You get to a point where you look and think, do adults, it's kind of like the adult Olympic lifting thing. We have really good coaches. We have lots of adults who probably would like the challenge of trying to learn to Olympic lift, but I know that Olympic lifting is going to backfire on a certain percentage of my population. Agreed. And I can't, and it was like Jordy had said in his post, well, in our facility, it's all individual. I'm like, that's great. People can say, when you're doing boutique fitness and you've got small numbers of clients, you can be very individualized. You can look and say, oh, we're going to do this with this person and this with this person. But when you, like with us, like CFSC, MBSC, whatever, when we're trying to develop a system, I think you have to have a stance on these kind of things. And our stance is just, I don't see heavy deadlifts, same with heavy squats. I don't see them. I don't see the need.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my point is I look at it and say, okay, try to find me the ADL, the activity of daily living thing that corresponds with even a 225 deadlift. Like I put that grandma deadlift video up there and that's what I mean, the slippery slope. this is what happens. As soon as you say it's okay, then that's what you end up with. You always come in and think like, oh my God, that's not okay. So it's a lot easier to say, hey, let's just, when somebody can deadlift the heaviest kettlebell for 10, let's switch them over to unilateral. That's going to make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
That's, and again, that's me. Like Elspeth, and I said that, Elspeth loves deadlifts. She loves straight bar deadlifts. You know what I mean? She's like, and I'm fine. Everybody runs their business the way they want to run their business, and they choose their priorities and what they want to do the same way that we choose ours. I just, when people ask me for my opinion, I give them my opinion, right? I mean, in my opinion is that it's not a good, it's not a good risk reward lift beyond a certain point in time.
Yeah. Okay. I just feel like, again, just going back to that idea that the trap bar just seems like it's almost foolproof. That's why I was wondering. And that's why I think you liked it as well. You had said that in the past as well. It's a pretty easy teach.
My problem is just that the trap bar will hold 400 pounds. And so, do you just, at some point, and that's like Ray was asking, is there a certain percentage of body weight, blah, blah, blah. Like you start getting into all of these like arbitrary rules. Do we just say, okay, nobody deadlifts over 225? Do we say nobody deadlifts over body weight? Do we say, you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
How about if we just don't do it and focus on things that are probably more real world? Those, that to me is a bigger piece of the puzzle. I'd rather have somebody push a sled with 400 pounds because I think that's really foolproof. You know what I mean? Like it's because you're not like the sled isn't pulling you into flexion. The sled isn't loading your lumbar spine and your spinal erectors, but you're still able to push against a reasonable amount of resistance as opposed to, looking and saying, okay, at what point do we look at the deadlift bar and think, oh, that was too much?
Yeah, I'll tell you, again, let's go back to the lens because Elspeth had a great response. But before we do that, I want to talk about my lenses. I also worry about the sled with my older guys sometimes. I'd rather have them on a trap bar deadlift because of the Achilles thing. Like these guys don't do any running. They don't have that ankle mobility. I feel like that, that they should have sometimes. And I worry about a heavy sled or even a fast sled. So, and she had talked about.
I worry more about a fast sled. I don't think, at least, like looking at it from my lens, my experience, is that Achilles tendons do not tend to go under load. They tend to go under speed. You know what I mean? So if I'm worried about somebody injuring their Achilles tendon, that's why, where were we talking about this the other day? Actually at the seminar, someone asked about, because I talked a lot about sprinting because it was really Updates and Athlete program was my talk. And, and one of the guys was like, how would you incorporate that with your adults? And I'm like, bike sprints, 10, 20s, that kind of stuff. Because I just wouldn't have my adults sprinting because I don't like that. I don't mind my adults running, but there is no question when you look at like the Achilles tendon tear kind of etiology, it is almost always a rapid change in speed, a rapid change in direction. A guy, all of a sudden, he's fast break, and he's going to run and catch up to play defense in basketball or change in direction in racquetball or whatever it is. And, there's always that, that popping feeling and that feeling of somebody hit them in the calf or the back of the leg. It's very, very consistent with what happens. It's not, I was doing calf raises and suddenly my Achilles tendon let go. There needs to be like a speed element to that thing, kind of a load and speed element that makes the difference in terms of rupturing that. And I don't, who knows? Somebody who knows more about tendon structure and tendon aging and a lot of that stuff could probably tell us why that happens. But I don't, like I said, we've been pushing sleds. And this is the other thing too with us. So we've been pushing sleds for a really long time with no problem. One of the things that we always talk about is that we're sort of always like vetting and evaluating everything that we're doing. So I would, if we had someone said, hey, I just had my third Achilles tendon tear with a guy pushing the heavy sled, then I might be looking and going, something heavy sled might not be the right thing for our adult population anymore. We've had 3, Achilles issues with that. We have not seen that. And that's why I think with deadlifting and squatting, my issue with deadlifting and squatting is in young, healthy people. If someone said to me, what were your two primary sources of injury with young, healthy people? They were back squat and straight bar deadlift, without question. Nothing else even entered the picture. There were only two lifts where we ever had people get injured. And it was generally people, when you start getting into not necessarily 1RM type stuff, but people trying to lift heavy load, people trying to get one more rep. I always say to people, it only has to be one bad rep. People are like, if you keep your back flat, and I'm like, I get it. The problem is when someone goes for that last rep and they don't do that, and now they're out of position, that's where the person gets injured. And you can't kind of stop somebody mid-rep and start screaming like, oh no, you're out of position, drop the bar. You know what I mean? That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
They went for that rep, and then in a thing like we notice trap bar, you know what the worst rep for us is?
First.
Always the first. And that's why sometimes we have to get guys to go down and wait. Like, okay, you got to get better at being tighter, more solid on that first rep. Because, reps, like, if we do a set of 5, I'll have a guy do 4 or 5 for 5, and rep 1, I'm like, oh, I didn't like that. And then he can kind of resets himself and gets, because we don't go back down to the floor and stop. Because I always say, I think rep 1 is the worst rep. Why would I do that? Why would I repeat that rep 5 times, right? But someone else might say, well, that's the worst rep. You should repeat it 5 times. So there's sort of, there's always two sides to every argument.
I agree with you. And I think I liked what I learned from Brett Jones was, if you ever watch Brett Jones go down like before a deadlift, it's as if he has the weight in his hand already. And he's going down really slow and really tight. He grabs the bar and then he comes up. And so I really, that's always worked for me. And for my clients is, once I learned that, is like approach that going down to pick up that bar with that, create that tension. So to me, that's always worked. But I know what you're saying. It's my wife. It's the same thing with the rower, with the erg. If you start out really hard, you'll hurt your back. So you have to, it's almost like there's a lot of rowers will show you, like there's like, you do a half one, 3/4, full one, then you start going hard, so it's a similar idea. Cause I think people end up pushing, they kind of jerk it, right?
Yeah. It's, I just think a lot of these things, when you get into lifting heavier loads, and this is one of the reasons why I so push our coaches to be lifters. Because like you say, look at someone like Brett, when you see someone who's a really accomplished deadlifter, you see kind of the nuance of that lift. Like, okay, there's so much, like someone would look and be like, grip it and rip it. Hey, you just got to put your hands on it, pull it up off the floor. And yet when you watch somebody who's really good at it, like you said, the whole process of creating tension and figuring out how to approach the bar. There's just a lot that goes into really heavy lifting that probably doesn't go into, kind of fitness oriented lifting. And the reality is for us, I talked about that in my talk too, in terms of you have to realize who you've got. And I've kind of been using the term check the box people, in the sense that if you have check the box people, they want to be able to say, I went to the gym today and I worked out. They're not going to go back and tell anybody how many reps they did or what weight they did. And the truth is, they don't care. They're usually the people that you have to remind to go up and weight, or they're always doing the same weight when they come in or whatever it is, because all they want to do is say they worked out. And I think that's great. Like if you get someone who's an adult who shows up at your gym 3 days a week and works out, like gets sweaty, lifts some weights, does a little conditioning, you're doing a lot of good for that person. I think sometimes as trainers, we get so wrapped up in, they don't take it serious. They don't write their weights down. And I'm like, for them, they are taking it serious. They might never have been an athlete. They might never have even, the idea of writing their weights down to them is probably literally laughably silly. Like who gives a shit? I lift what I think I can lift when I get here today. And tomorrow, if I come and I don't feel good, I'll lift something lighter. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And we're really trying to get our coaches to understand, because again, most of us come from a very different place. We're not check the box people. We're not in fitness because we're check the box people. We're not trying to check those people that are check the box people are, trying to find a job, with a pension where they get to punch in and punch out and it's 8 hours and they get to go to the bar after work. You know what I mean? Those are the check the box people. We're not check the box people, but we need to understand that a lot of our clients are.
Agreed. And you got to figure that out by asking them. And that's why we have Todd Bumgardner on today talking about his new book and his coaching stuff. And it's really good. But Coach, I wanted to finish up really quick. You wrote an article more about the research, and I had posted another research article. And I think what I really got out of your article, and I think that's why I posted the other one as well, was because it's just a warning. Like, you need to look at a little deeper into the research sometimes, where sometimes there's a study, well, you mentioned a study, and it ends up being untrained subjects, seated isometric elbow flexion. I think the study that I was referencing had only 10 people in it. So there's the way I got it, you wrote this article that kind of just be like, hey, just a little warning about misinterpreting research.
Yeah, because I think, and as I said, I follow Chris Beardsley on Twitter because he's always posting research studies. But I think, and this is where I get a little bit, I don't know what the word is. I just, I guess I take offense sometimes when people over extrapolate the result of a study, because I read that study result and thought, wow, this is a really important study because it's establishing that, that strength is more important than endurance. You know what I mean? And I was like, that's really important. And, they're talking about CNS fatigue with heavy strength training, using multi-joint exercises. I was like, this is right up our alley. And then I read the study and I was like, untrained subjects did curls, iso curls. You know what I mean? And I was like, how the hell did we get that from this? And I think that's part of the problem. I have another guy who's always messaging on me on Twitter about the same thing. Like, he'll read a research study and he'll be like, oh, does that mean heavy sleds are no good? And I'm like, no, like, read this study. Don't read what the person writes as their interpretation of the study or as their conclusion or however we want to look at that particular thing. Take a moment at least and go in and say, wait a second, what was this study really about? And does what this study purports to be about really relate to what this person wants me to believe about the study? Because they often, in my mind, are not the same thing. And I think, as I said, I always bring up the, it's, and I've been dancing around this one forever, but it's a Brad Schoenfeld, Brett Contreras. And I forget what it's called. It's not a meta-analysis, but it was like a review of literature kind of thing. They did this really big thing on core training years ago. And basically when they wrote the conclusion, I felt like the conclusion that they wrote was not supported by the studies that they read. Based on what I read. Like, I went through all the studies. I went, I'm going to go back and look. And I literally, because I am sometimes an anal weirdo, I went through and looked at everything that was in there. And I'm like, wow, I don't think their conclusion is supported by the data. But then I asked myself, well, gee, I wonder how many people, and the one I always use is the stretching thing. Static stretching decreases power, don't static stretch. Easy. And until you really go back and look at the research, you're sort of like, that's not really what the research says. It's, that's somebody who doesn't want you to stretch his interpretation of what that research said. And there's just so many of those things out there. Endurance training is bad for you. Strength training is good for you. It's like you have to be a little bit more of an educated consumer.
Absolutely. Good stuff, Coach. Well, we'll let you go on that. Hope you feel better. You got to get some rest there and get back to work. So
be the day. Like I said, I still feel, if you said to me today, you have to do this and it really matters, I could do whatever it was. I could do it.
Yeah.
It's not a big, but at the same time, I just would like to, I'd like to feel good again. That would be a really big, that'd be a big plus for me.
Well, suck it up, Buttercup. That's
yeah,
politically incorrect, by the way.
Yeah, you young guys,
Exactly.
The young guys can talk shit, Come back near my age, Anthony.
There you go. I will. You see, I'll tell you. You said this to me 10 years ago, and I'm not 10 years younger than you, so there you go. All right, guys, right now at Perform Better, there's free online shipping. They still have that going. There's no minimum order. So anything you get when you shop online, there's free shipping. All right, don't forget the one-day seminars. The next one is in Austin, Texas on February 22nd. Then you move to Orlando, Boston, and Chicago. Also, the summits have been announced. So Orlando is in June, as well as Long Beach is in June as well. Chicago is in July, and Providence is in August. I will be at Long Beach and Chicago, so if you're going to be out there, make sure you come and say hi. You can check out performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars.
Hey, this is Alwyn.
This is Tim.
Welcome back to the Train Heroic Data-Driven Coaching segment.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to continue our little series here and talk about training frequency.
Sure.
Right? We talked about how these things are interrelated, and we'll get into that, but focus on frequency today.
Yeah.
And we're going to focus on frequency for hypertrophy or muscle gain, right? Because it gets a little bit different when you're talking about like technique or skill or anything like that.
Absolutely. I think it's important, too, that we define it.
Yeah, so go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, so we're going to keep it real simple. Training frequency, how many times throughout the week are you training a particular movement? Or for our scenario today, are you training a particular muscle group, right, for hypertrophy? So keep it simple for now and moving forward. That's the best way to look at this.
Yeah, and that's how most people think about training frequency when you write a program, right? Now, if you're out there doing like 2-a-days, maybe it gets more complicated, but most of the research that, it's on days per week, essentially.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So I think as a starting point, like I think we all, when we start writing programs and thinking about programming, we start with like what we've been exposed to. Right, early on.
Bingo, and that's
right?
That's how I started. I started with like a 4-day split. My coaching my athletes, right? We did a bench day, a squat day, a deadlift day, a speed day, and that's what I was used to. You know what I mean? So it's pretty low frequency training. We were hitting these things once a week.
Sure. That's not that much different from like the dreaded bro split, right?
Right, which is not derogatory. I don't mean it that way, but
that's what it's called.
You get the idea of what we're talking about.
But okay, can those things work though?
Sure.
Right?
I think we all know people who would train something once a week can get huge.
So we're not talking smack about those methods. Like I think that like there are just different options out there for different people.
Totally. And I think, I was lucky enough early on to change what I did. You know what I mean? I did that 4-day-a-week split there, and then I changed it to a 3-a-day due to some circumstances. And I actually found that we were driving those adaptations a little harder, the ones we were looking for. We spread main lifts and then some accessory lifts throughout the week. So we're actually doing training muscle groups at a higher frequency, which was cool to see,
Yeah. And when I started training in college, lifting in college, was basically doing full body like 2 or 3 times a week.
Sure.
And full body was bench and triceps and curls and some rows in there.
Now we're talking. This is my stuff.
That was my whole body back in college.
Great.
Jokes aside, right? Then I started getting more interested in powerlifting.
Sure.
And you get exposed to like the upper lower splits, like the 4-day-a-week, 2 and 2.
You got it.
Right. And then it's kind of evolved over time, and it's pretty common now for a lot of benchers to, people to bench 3 or 4 days a week.
Crush it throughout the week.
So you start, instead of having upper lower strictly, you start mixing them together, moving things around. Right.
Right.
So like, what does evidence say about, the benefits of training with higher or lower frequency?
Right.
So
go ahead.
Right. So like we said, 1 day a week can work.
Yes.
And then logically, you'd be like, well, 2 might be better because then I get, if I'm spiking my muscle protein synthesis and all that jazz, it lasts so long, right?
Yes.
So then like twice a week, I get another dose, and 3, I get another one until you could just take some ridiculous conclusion and training constantly, but that doesn't work.
So we do know based off the research, 2 is better than 1. 3, I'm going to go out on a limb here, might be better than 2. But there's not a whole lot of research at super high frequencies just because it's not super common.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That one's a little harder to look at.
Right. And I think people are looking for the magic potion. What's the how many days should we train for optimal results?
Yeah, you're right. I think the effect size of training twice a week versus once is larger.
Sure.
And I think that's pretty well established.
Yeah.
So if you had a big default of the best way to train for muscle growth, probably starting it twice a week.
Right.
And, the funny thing about that is we talk about volume because these are related, right? So if, training frequency and you're going 1 day a week, like training your chest on Mondays or whatever,
right,
you're going to cram a whole lot of volume in a session.
Yes.
So let's say it's, 15 sets. Let's just say you do a lot of volume in one session.
Yeah.
Now you could also split that over 2 sessions, like a session of 8 and a session of 7 sets.
Right.
Right. And that would probably get you better results.
Yeah. And I think the key thing you said there is you kind of spread your volume out, right?
Yeah.
These things are related. You didn't do, all right, we're going to train, 4 sets of 10 bench press 3 times a week, right? You take that initial volume and you spread it out. Yeah. Especially if you're transitioning from like low frequency training to high frequency.
And so the other thing that implies too, right, though, is that, like if you were training, twice versus once and you split the volume, that probably would be better.
Yeah.
Training with more frequency also is probably a good way for you to up your volume if that's your goal. Yeah, right. Absolutely. So now I could do 2 sets. I could do 10 and 10, and I've just jacked my volume way up, right?
Yeah, doubled it.
Maybe I wouldn't want to jump right to that, but that's that's one way. So you start adding more days, you can probably tolerate more volume.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And that's the kind of like when related to hypertrophy, like volume is one of the main kind of like predictors.
Sure, and I think something key here to realize, to know is if you're doing something that's working, you don't have to change it. But once it stops working, it might not be bad to change up that training frequency.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
If you just haven't changed things in a while, when you hear people do a new program, almost always they realize some benefit of it, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
All right, we're going to get into strength next time.
Yes.
So that's it for us today. Go to trainheroic.com, start your 14-day free trial. When you're talking to one of our representatives, tell them the Strength Coach Podcast sent you for 10% off a year with Pro or Elite Edition.
All right, now it's time for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. We got the man back, Alwyn Cosgrove. Alwyn, thanks for doing this.
I'm glad to be back. I know Rachel we'd done the last few series, and there was a lot of complaints that I wasn't on. I'm lying. But I'm glad to be back.
All right. And don't forget, we had Elias on before that, so we haven't had you on in a while. I don't think so. Yeah,
it's been that long. Wow.
I've been getting some angry emails, so I had to get you back on. So I want to talk to you about, and you and I have talked about this a lot with other things, kind of these done-for-you marketing programs, but there's so much focus right now on marketing, on getting people into the gym. And I'm talking about social media, and I hear from a couple of gym owners that I talk about, they're so worried about getting people in there. And I even wrote an article about it called, don't worry about the people on the line. And that was from a reference to my bar days. Anyway,
that's a good article, by the way. Everybody needs to read that one.
Thank you. I'll post a link in this episode. Look, we don't see, hey, keep the clients you're getting programs. And I think we should, as people, should talk more about how to really focus on. I actually just read Never Lose a Customer Again recently and listened to it. And it's a great book, and it talks about some of these things that I'm actually trying to implement in strengthcoach.com. But talk to us about some things that you guys do to make sure that you're keeping these valuable people that you already have, who've already paying you in your gym, and you want to keep them there.
It's one of the things that I always call this the question you should be asking, right? So when you start doing consulting for businesses, or even when you're writing training programs for people, there's a surface level question that someone will ask you, I want to lose body fat, and you're like, well, why is that? And then we always call it the inception technique, and you're like, and what's important about that? Until you eventually get down to the real truth. So the real reason that a lot of people are asking marketing questions is because they can't keep their clients. People are leaving constantly, right? So the question I always have is, how come you've been open for 5 years and you still have room in your schedule for all these clients, right? You could take on 25 more, right? Now, let's be honest, nobody renews 100%, right? People get to their goals, they move. Right, we've had, unfortunately this year we had a client who actually passed away, and you've experienced that yourself, Ant. So nobody renews 100%. So you should be looking for about a year on year. I think about a 70% to 80% retention level with your coaching clients. So it's so much easier to keep an existing member than it is to get a new member. So what you have to do is start looking for retention programs. And I did this talk a few years ago for Perform Better called the Executive Athlete, or Developing the Athlete. At some point, a beginner comes to you because, let's just say it's a general fitness client, and they're a beginner, and they come to you to lose a little body fat and get in shape, and your fee is $200 a month, $300 a month, and they get in shape. At some point, to just maintain that price, that investment is high. and they may go and do it on their own for a little while, and they may regain all the weight and they may lose their fitness and they may not do it and come back to you later. But that doesn't help your business. So what you have to do is focus on a couple of things. One is, do you have a cool culture within your other clients and within your gym that people just want to be part of it, right? Is there something cool at what you do when you're there that people are just like, I'm never leaving this place. This is so awesome. It's changed everything about me and I love being here. And that's the first part. And that's kind of vague, right? So what we do is, why does an athlete keep competing in their sport? Not a pro, just someone who's competing. Well, they compete in their sport because there's challenges coming up, right? So my goal always is to take a client and make them a member of the gym, so their identity starts to change, and they're not someone who's hired me for a little while. They're someone who trains at Results Fitness and is a member of our gym. And my ultimate goal is to get them to become an athlete, or to think of themselves as an athlete, because athletes stay with their sport and they generally stay with their coaches unless they're leveling up. So I try to find something that people like, right? And if you've ever seen my talk, you'll see we've got people doing powerlifting, triathlons, 5Ks, and they used to be called mud runs. Now they're called obstacle course races, right? And these are accessible to a lot of people. American football, NFL, is not accessible to a lot of people. Even touch football, right, or flag football, there's not a whole lot of adult leagues we can find for people to do that. Yeah. But you can find a lot of these in races, and there's starting to be a little more I want to say like fitness competitions starting to appear. High Rocks is one, DecaFit is the other. And I guess it's kind of like a CrossFit Games Light, that type of fitness contest. But one of our plans is to create this culture where clients are now training for something. So I've got to figure out something for them to direct themselves towards. Ideally, they become powerlifters. We've got Sue and a bunch of people at the gym who would describe themselves as powerlifters because that's why they're training. But we have a bigger group who'll just do the next fun thing. They might there's an event called the Epic Series out here, which is like a sort of like a obstacle course race combined with like a mini strongman contest. They'll do a mud run. They maybe do a pure obstacle race. There's some stadium races. So we try to find things for them. And within that, we'll also do a couple of times a year, maybe like a fat loss focused block, right? Where I'm like, now we're just going to focus on body comp and nutrition. But this has to come from the coach. You have to be finding these things and instill it in these clients. So we have our write this down if you're listening. You should have an internal operating system of the last gym you'll ever join. Right? If anybody leaves Results Fitness, it's because they're moving out of town or they're not going to do exercise anymore. That's my goal. Yeah. Is that I'm the last gym you're ever going to join. And it's the retention key is the culture's part of it, but it's almost like a graduate program. Like you come in and you're in shape now, and now what? They won't pay that money to just maintain. They won't, and as a coach too, just training someone to get leaner and look better forever and ever, that gets kind of boring too, right? Yeah. Like, so I want the golfer who's trying to qualify for something. I want the person who's taking a snowboarding trip who wants to train for that. I like people who I'm like, this lady came in and was skinny and unathletic and a mother of 3, and she's now, doing a stadium race, right? I want that too. So the retention is key. I think this is the dirty little secret, right? Like a lot of gyms have to work on marketing because people don't want to train with you anymore and leave. And it's not always because they don't like you. They're bored. Right? They're bored and they're in shape and they're just like, I've done this. I'm gonna go learn karate now. I'm gonna do something different now. I might learn cooking. Right? And that's the part of it, is that we don't have a graduation for them. Like we don't have something that they're becoming. Right? And it's interesting is in the martial arts world, I think it's 1 in 1,000 makes it to black belt. Right? There's such a dropout rate throughout it, but there's something like 1 in 5,000 makes it to 2nd degree black belt. Because that there seems to be like that's the end. And I could see it if you're not competing in martial arts competitions, that would be the end. So I think it's similar with fitness. We call it, you have to develop an athlete. You have to send people towards some type of competitive thing or some type of built-in short-term challenges throughout the year. And I know some of you are listening goes, oh, my clients, they're not competitive. They don't want to do sports. They're just training to look good. I'm like, they're the ones that will leave. Unless they don't look good, a lot of them won't stay and pay your fees just to maintain that. So culture and then creating some sort of competitive opportunity for them, I think is the way to go.
Love it. I feel like it's almost like a job. Like you have to think of it where there's room for growth. So, you know that, okay, I can be a CEO of this company one day, for example. It's just a kind of a weird example, but there's room, there's steps. And I think that's what if you're doing that in the gym, people know I can get to the powerlifting team. I can get to the obstacle course racing team, or I could be on the recreational level. But, you can kind of slowly move up when you see that there's room to kind of move instead of just sitting there saying, I'm going to get my biceps bigger. It's certainly something, because we all know with the job.
It's exactly that. It's like, what's the next move, right? Like you think of that, like anything that we talk about is like, there's not this is the end line. I join the gym and I get in shape and that's the end. Right? I mean, if you look at numbers for a gym, if you had 100 members your first year or let's call it 100% and 70% of them stayed with you, you're flatlining within 3 years, right? You'll have 100 the first year, 170 the next year, and you're up to 220, 250, and you're completely flat at a certain point because at 70% renewal, you're losing as many as 100 if you added 100 a year. So at some point, you should be maxed out, right? And you should be you're just replacing some of the clients that have left or moved on. But your idea is to level up, right? We shouldn't be, fitness should be for life for people, and we should be leveling them up. But there has to be once you get in shape, we're going to do something. And I think that's the physical therapy model is once your knee stops hurting, you leave, right? Like your knee's better and you're out, right? Like, there's a finish line to this. Well, we need to keep creating that. And it's like I said, no one will renew 100% of members, but you shouldn't be, unless you're doing some type of weird short-term programs all the time, you should have a nice retention. And I think it's your job to find that as the coach. Your job is to find, hey, we're doing a 5K as a team. And the client will say, I could never do a 5K. And like, you'll be great at it. And we've got this thing, one of our coaches actually started it is because we were doing the obstacle course race stuff and people are like, I hate running. I don't want to run. And she started going to these Go Ruck things. You heard about these where you just carry the heavy backpack?
I have 3 Go Ruck bags. I have 2 of their boots. That's my favorite thing right now.
So we've got a ruck team now, and then actually one of a local obstacle course race company, there's a local race. They've got a ruck division.
Yeah, they're becoming more popular now. Yeah.
And it's just like there's a whole other market for these people now. They don't want to run, but they want to. I don't get it. Like but it's not. I always say this: you don't have to get it, right? They get it, and they want to train for it, and it gives them a direction. And I'll tell you, one of the mistakes we made at Results Fitness is we did a Spartan race a long time ago, and it was so exciting. We didn't think about doing it until it came back to our town the next year. You got to bottle that energy of that finish line and get them ready to do something else in like 12 weeks, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And that excitement of the finish line is like, it's so big that they're high-fiving each other and they just got a medal for crossing a finish line because of you.
Yeah.
You bought that, they're never losing you. They're never leaving you. But it will go away if you don't set something, if you're not looking for something else. You got to look for what's the next event, what's the next cool thing we're going to do.
Absolutely. Great stuff, Alwyn. Thank you so much for coming on today and talking about retention of our clients.
All right, guys, thanks for listening. Any questions, you can reach out to me on social media. Just look for my name and you can slide into my DMs with anything. But the key with retention is you're thinking of the next step for your clients, and you're always thinking of that from the first day that they join. What's next? So get after it.
All right, guys, for more information, make sure you check out resultsfitnessuniversity.com.
Hey, welcome to the Functional Movement Systems segment. This is Lee Burton, president and one of the co-founders of Functional Movement Systems. Along with my colleague Greg Cook and I, we founded the Functional Movement Screen and Systems over 20 years ago now. And I'm excited to be part of Strength Coach Podcast. We've been a part of this for a number of years now, so it's always exciting to be back on and talk. Today, actually, I'm going to be talking about something we've been working on quite a while, and that's some changes to the Functional Movement Screen. And I'm going to break this up into two parts. And today, in this first part, I'm going to be talking about the Rotary Stability changes. And as a lot of you guys know, the Rotary Stability, if you're familiar with the FMS, the Rotary Stability is one of those tests that's really challenging, really been difficult for a lot of people to do. And for the most part, people have sometimes some difficulty understanding why you're even doing it. And so before I kind of get into the changes and kind of that process, I want to just kind of review on the reasoning we put the Rotary Stability in all those years ago. And I think, again, if we're looking at movement and the fundamentals of movement, the whole point of the movement screen is to really set that baseline and determine where you need to start your training. One, making sure you don't have any pain, making sure that you got some basics for movement, and then determining where you should not be working because you may have some problems, like the squat. If you can't squat, let's not squat. And then making sure we understand what you can do. And then we use those fundamentals, that neurodevelopmental process, how we learn to move, going back to babies, going all the way up from learning how to control your spine to crawling to squatting, all the way up to standing. And we use that for the foundations of how we develop the movement screen. And one of those more fundamental pieces of that is that Rotary Stability. And if you understand or again, have any familiarity with the FMS, you know that Rotary Stability is that quadruped pattern where we look at, that reciprocal patterning, kind of that crawling patterning. But what we wanted to do, because we knew the crawling pattern was something, that quadruped diagonal pattern, the flexion extension of the opposite arm and leg, that's a very standard thing. And that's something that everyone should be able to do. So if we're developing a good test, we need to think about something that's going to challenge you much harder. Because again, one of the struggles we had early on with the FMS is making sure that we have a good distribution of scores. We need to make sure that we've got a lot of that 2 area, which is kind of normal. We want to make sure most people kind of are in that normal area. So for us, that's a 2. We need to make sure that we get a few 3s, which is the higher end. And let's make sure we get a few 1s and a few 0s. And that's how we break it down. So we need to make sure that we got a lot of 2s, but we also need to make sure that the test was challenging, but not so hard that we only had a few 3s. So, 15, 20% 3s, a lot of 2s, a few percent 1s and 0s. So with Rotary Stability, the reason we look at Rotary Stability is not so much mimicking that crawling pattern, which a lot of people would assume, but even early on, what we wanted to do is break down and challenge that low threshold core stability. Now, the push-up challenges your high threshold core stability, like your fundamentals of power, like that transferring that energy, like punching, kicking, hitting a golf ball, spiking a volleyball. Those require high threshold stabilization. So if you think about hitting or doing a punch, when you land that punch, you really brace. You get that feeling. You brace and control your spine and make sure your spine is stable. That's that high threshold. Well, we need to also think about low threshold. That low threshold is when you're kind of moving around and you react and respond, but you're not creating a lot of power, but you're setting the stage to just do some basic things like, simply opening a door, picking up an object off the ground, changing directions. So that fundamental core stability is what we're challenging with Rotary Stability, that low threshold. So what we want to do is we want to put you in a very fundamental position and create an unstable environment. So putting you in that quadruped, that crawling position, create an unstable environment and see if you can react and reflexively stabilize your spine in that unstable environment. So we wanted to, again, decrease your base of support by going to that quadruped diagonal pattern and see if you can stabilize. And then that's why we went to that ipsilateral, or that same side flexion and extension pattern, to see if you could stabilize. So we knew everybody should be able to do that quadruped diagonal pattern, which is good, but let's challenge you with that higher level pattern to see if you can stabilize as well. And that was our thinking early on when we developed the Rotary Stability Test as part of our overall movement screen. So we needed to check that low threshold reflex stabilization. The push-up was doing a good job of it. But as we went through the years, we started to see the data wasn't lining up like we wanted. We wanted to see a good distribution of scores. And what we were seeing was that everybody was getting 2s. Well, if you've done a movement screen, it's like, yeah, no kidding, Lee. Of course, everybody's getting 2s. I've been saying that for years and years. Well, we knew it. We just had to prove it. And as we got more data over the years of doing the FMS, we started seeing that more people getting 2s. But here's where our thinking is different than how most people use the screen. We want to make sure we're putting you down the right path to improve your movements. So what was occurring is, because so many people were getting 2s, we were not having enough 1s. Most people assume we're just looking to get people more 3s. That's not what we're looking for. We're always trying to look or create a non-failure strategy. I'm trying to identify who fails our test, because if you fail our test, that is a major, major problem that we need to address. So what was happening when we started looking at the data, we knew early on that we're probably having too many 2s, not enough 3s, not enough 1s. But what we had to really dive into is, okay, not how to fix it, but let's look at the scores and see, are we still putting them down the right path? And what we're finding is a lot of these people are getting 2s on the Rotary Stability, we're getting 1s on the push-up. So what we were doing is, in essence, we were giving them corrective strategies to improve their high threshold strategy. And we were not challenging or putting them on the path to improve their low threshold strategies. So we were missing a big opportunity to create better fundamental core stabilization because we were not putting them down the right path. So one thing we did to kind of solve the problem was actually we started adding in a few more rolling patterns, things that we were doing for Rotary Stability, into the push-up test. Into the push-up corrective strategy. So we tried to deal with it that way. And we saw some success, but we knew we needed to improve the Rotary Stability test. So we started probably 6 or 7 years ago, believe it or not. Years ago, I want to say, I look back at some notes preparing for this, 2011, we started looking at how can we improve the Rotary Stability test. And then we collected, we got our, brain trust together, all the, people that we go to get feedback that are out there in the field working. And we started playing around with different ways to improve Rotary Stability scoring and testing. And we got some feedback. We got a few variations over the years, I say, because it took us a while to kind of go through this process. And then we went to the research, and we did some research with University of Evansville and some of their physical therapy students and residents and some of the high-level researchers that we work with, Dr. Kyle Kiesel, Dr. Phil Plisky, who have been part of our community for a long time. And we did a lot of testing. I think a few hundred people went through with our new scoring criteria, and we realized that we hit the mark pretty good, that we got a much better distribution. We got a lot more 1s. We were able to get a lot more 3s. So we knew we're on the right track. But when we made the changes, and I'll go through some of those changes, we didn't do what most people assume we would do, that more fundamental quadruped diagonal pattern. We stuck to that ipsilateral pattern. So we actually have you in that ipsilateral pattern. We changed up the setup. We changed up the how to do it a little bit. One of the big things we do is we have you touch your ankle instead of going elbow to knee. Elbow to knee is a lot more challenging and not necessarily functional. Most people don't take elbow to knee throughout daily activities, but most people do take that hand and touch the foot, trying to put on their shoes, going under their toes. So we felt like that was a much better way to do it. So we actually changed up the criteria. We've got a lot of that information on our website. It's going to be coming out here. You probably already came out, but we've got it. We've got all that information So if you've gone through our certification, gone through our education, you can definitely access that on our website. So go check that out. So we've dialed it in a lot better scoring criteria through the research, a lot better normal distribution, but more importantly, putting you on the right path for correcting your low threshold. What Rotary Stability was really set out to do is that low threshold core stabilization. And we feel like we got a lot better opportunity to put you on that right path. So check out the changes on our website. Go to functionalmovement.com. And definitely, I'll be talking about the other changes in part 2 of this segment.
Welcome to a special DVRT series on multiplanar training. My name is Josh Henkin, founder of DVRT. Today, I want to talk about a concept that I think a lot of people overlook in their training that is such an easy and valuable variable to make programs better, smarter, and more effective. So when we talk about multiplanar training, I want to get into how you incorporate into your progressions and how we program it. But first, we have to understand the problem in the first place. So if we look at the foundation of all strength training, we can go back to the concept of progressive overload. And if I ask most coaches, what does progressive overload mean? They're probably going to tell me something along the lines of, you've got to add weight to an exercise to make it more difficult. While they're not inherently wrong, that doesn't tell you actually the full story. So most of us get into the fitness industry or strength conditioning, and we hear the story about Milo, the ancient Greek. And Milo starts carrying a calf. And over time, the calf grows, and Milo continues to carry the same cow as it gets bigger and bigger, basically showing us the idea that to get stronger, we have to add more weight. Unfortunately, what we don't get is the full story, as the late, great Dr. Mel Stiff, who everyone knows for the book Supertrain, goes over. Basically, if we were to take that story literally, we'd eventually have a bull that would be thousands and thousands of pounds. Now, I don't know about you guys. I don't know anyone in any particular lift that can lift thousands and thousands of pounds. In fact, I think overall we agree that increasing load in exercise doesn't happen in a purely linear manner. Now, that means that we've all adapted other variables to actually make an exercise or a program more or less intense. Things like the range of motion, the speed of the movement, the volume of work, the density, and so forth. So these are all concepts that we all think about, whether intuitively or hopefully most of us actually put into our programs to make an exercise more advanced or to relate more to the beginner. So we know inherently there are more variables to progressive overload than just the load itself. And that takes us back to the foundational concept that overload actually means applying a stress to the body than greater than before. Because we all know we adapt to any workout over time. That's part of the point. We adapt and then we add a greater and greater challenge over time. Well, that's where planes of motion come into play. So planes of motion, we often think about, we've seen them in our kinesiology books or maybe our personal training certification books. There's 3 planes of motion. We have our sagittal plane, which we can think about as up and down, front and back. Our frontal plane, which we can go side to side, and transverse, which is rotation. Now, some of you out there might be saying, well, Josh, we can actually talk about each of these in individual joints. And that is true. Each joint we can discuss about, does it move sagittal, frontal, and transverse? But for the sake of this discussion, I wanted to keep it to full body movements because I think that's going to be most relevant to what most of us are actually doing. Now, I'm far from the first to talk about planes of motion. There's been lots of great people to do it, including physical therapist Gary Gray, who's probably one of the fathers of functional training. But I thought we had a simple system that really hasn't been encountered before that we could really help create some better solutions. So whenever we're talking about a movement, we're talking about what planes of motion are we using. Well, if I ask you what makes us uniquely human, it's not squatting, it's not deadlifting, it's locomotion. So when we think about locomotion, sadly, most of us actually don't know too much about how we walk. We don't know what's made up of it. We don't know how the chains work together. We don't know the challenges of it. It's actually far more complex than anything we generally do in the gym. However, when we do something as simple as walking, we use all 3 planes of motion. We move through the sagittal plane if I'm walking straight ahead. I have to resist the frontal plane, otherwise you get my wonderful model walk. And we use contralateral movement of the arms and legs to create some rotation for efficient energy production, but also for stability in our body. So we know something as simple and foundational as locomotion. We use all 3 planes of motion. But time and time again, when it comes to looking at strength conditioning programs or fitness programs, we fail to actually utilize these concepts in our program. Again, we end up seeing the sagittal plane as being the dominant plane of motion in most of the programs that we look at. Now, that's not inherently a bad thing to use the Sagile plane. The Sagile plane offers us some unique variables, and what we have to look at is basically how do we make incremental changes to our use of the planes of motion. Instead of assigning them randomly in our workouts or just trying to think of how to make exercise more challenging or more interesting, we actually want to think about the planes of motion in the same context as we would load, volume, density, and so forth. When we do so, we can start to create better solutions and look at our movement patterns are far more extensive than we think about when we talk about functional training. After all, functional training is not about replicating movement, but building up the qualities that make up our everyday movement patterns or how we move in sport. So that's it for today. My name is Josh Hankin. On the next episode, I will discuss why these planes of motion are so important. So for more information, please check out dvrtfitness.com.
All right, now it's time for the BodyByBoyleOnline.com. Hit the gym with the strength coach segment. Become an insider to Mike Boyle's strength and conditioning with staff meetings, in-services, and complete access to the MBSC programs. Check it out at BodyByBoyleOnline.com. All right, today I have on Todd Bumgardner, and he is the co-founder of Beyond Strength Performance, as well as the co-founder of Strength Faction. He's worked as a college strength coach in the private sector. He's coached NFL linebackers, youth athletes, and folks from all walks of life, which we're going to talk about because he's now an author of the new book, Let the First Rep Suck, The Art of Unconditionally Positive Fitness Coaching. And Todd, thanks for doing this.
Oh, man. Thank you, Anthony. I think that's absolutely the best podcast introduction I've ever gotten. So
all right. Awesome.
You nailed it.
So I saw a video last week of you talking about the release of your new book, Let the First Rep Suck. And I love that title. I love this idea. But the cool thing about this book was it's going to a good cause. The month of February, anybody that buys this book, it's going to a good cause. Talk to us about what this is all about. Did you publish this book just for that, or talk to us a whole thing about about Let the First Rep Suck?
Yeah. So I mean, I didn't. I'll be upfront saying that I didn't publish it just for that reason. But I've been working on this book for probably about a year and a half. It probably should not have taken me that long, but it ended up taking me that long. And right as it was coming out, I was looking at why am I putting this out? I'm putting it out to help as many people as I possibly can. And at the same time, I was actually driving back to driving back from Pennsylvania to Virginia, and I had been talking to one of my clients' moms, my client Ryan, and last year. About this time, he was diagnosed with NBIA MPAN, which NBIA stands for neurodegeneration with brain iron accumulation, and it's a degenerative disease. It essentially presents as a few different disorders. So have like Parkinson's-like syndromes, muscle spasticity, kind of like CP. Speech is affected. Eventually, cognition will be affected, and eventually it'll affect him psychiatrically. So with mood disorders and impulsivity and things like that. And so, when he got this diagnosis, they thought it was CP for the longest time, but he got this diagnosis and they found out how rare it is. And there's just really no funding for it because it's so rare. His mom went on this crusade to start raising money to get the research done by Children's National Hospital in DC. And so, she comes to me and tells me all this, and she's like, well, we need $300,000. And me being the grand optimist that I am, I was like, oh, well, we can do that. And so we started putting on fundraisers and stuff, and I started selling T-shirts again. We did some things at some local places. And, I was talking with them not long ago about where we were on the funding, and it's enough to get the party started. We got about halfway there, but we need about $150,000 more dollars. And I was like, well, why don't I just take the money from this and give it to Ryan for the first month? And really, I'll likely do this again and donate the proceeds, but I was like, I have to put a deadline on this to get people to act. So I was like, I'm going to do it this whole first month. We're going to swing hard and see what we can do. So we can get the money for this research because, there's no other way to get it. And Ryan's a great kid from a great family. And there's other folks that have, it's just a brutal disease that just literally people watch their family members like wither away and die right in front of them. And I was like, well, if we can use a book that's about helping the most people you possibly can to try to help people in a different way, and why wouldn't I do that? So that's what kind of led me to do that.
Very cool. So I'll remind everybody, it's the month of February. So, and I like what you said in the video, when Ryan was in the video and you said, hey, bud, you want to say anything? He didn't want to say anything. He was so cute. He's like, nope. So look, like Todd said in that video, don't even worry about reading it. Just buy the book, because then the money's going to it. But after this interview, I promise you'll want to read this book. Todd did a great job with this. I'll confess, I just got this Wednesday, and I wanted to get Todd on as quick as possible because, again, it has to be in the month of February where we want people to buy this book and let that money go to Ryan. So, Todd, let's talk about this. Sure. Again, I love this. Let the first rep suck. And I think there's over the last bunch of years, we started here on my show with Nick Winkleman doing The Art of Coaching in 2009. And at the time, there really was nobody talking about that. And it's become a real popular concept and something that people have really been talking about a lot over the last few years. Brett Bartholomew, of course. But we always need to keep working on this because I think people don't always understand it or don't always follow through with it. So let's get into this and you talk about the life cycle of your clients and who is coming into Beyond Strength Performance. Let's talk about the life cycle of a client.
Yeah. So for us, we train mostly Gen Pop folks. We train mostly folks later, like between 35 and 55. Most of them have been doing other training before. They've done other things and things just haven't worked out for them. So they come to us when they're like finally ready to be like, you know what, I've done all these other things. It's time for me to actually get serious about this and do something about it. So we have, the first thing we do is we have a really in-depth consultation. And Chris Merritt, who is my business partner, he's just lights out as a conversationalist. And he does a really good job with making people feel welcome and making people feel comfortable and finding out the information that we need to know and helping them reveal the information to themselves that they need to know about why we're here and why we're doing this thing. So as part of that, there's a really in-depth interview, and Chris does a great job with that. And he also, as part of that session, FMSs them. So it's like we're looking at, okay, so psychologically, mentally, emotionally, where's this person at? Why are they doing this? Why are they here? We also get then our objective physical measure in that session as well. And from there, we schedule something called our personal orientation session because, back in the day, we found out as much as we love the FMS, it's not enough for us to put somebody in the best positions to be successful from a training standpoint. So we take our second session and we put people into what we call our personal orientation session. One of our coaches will lead them through the warm-up so they feel comfortable with that. And then we'll take them through all of our progressions and regressions for our core 4 movements using the FMS as like a guide of like, okay, so they'll likely start at this level of our progression and regression, and walk them through all of that. And that essentially turns into a training session as well. But what it does for us is it gives us the opportunity to further evaluate how they move, but also their personality. And we come away from that with notes like, okay, so this looks like it could be a good starting point for this exercise and so on and so forth. But also, we note how they interact. We know how they move through the environment. We note the questions that they ask. And at the end of that session, our coaches also give notes on what's this person's personality like. And we have, our 3 main client archetypes just based on how people want to extract and learn in our environment. We call them what people, why people, and how people. And our folks make notes on that during the session too, and pass that on. And then from there, we start training, man. We get people set up on their program. We run we call it small group personal training. We call it that because, everybody else calls it semi-private. We call it small group personal training because a regular person has no idea what you mean by semi-private training. It just sounds like a lack to them. It's like, so I'm only getting some of this. So we call it small group personal training. And then they start training, and depending on what membership folks are on with us, every 4 to 6 weeks, we do a program update. And through that, we do, at the end, we do our end of phase chats. And on the back of each person's program, there is a questionnaire. So did you reach your goals for this past session? What was good? What was bad? What are our goals for next session? How are we going to know that it's working? And so they make a so that statement, a why statement. So why are we continuing to go after these things? They'll fill that out, and then the coaches have a 5 to 10 minute conversation with them, and just ask them open-ended questions about what's on the back of that sheet. And so that everybody gets on the same page. That information is condensed and then passed on to our programming team so that they can update this person's program. And then when we go through 4 programs every 4 to 6 months, depending on how often somebody's training with us, they have an end of block chat. And really, just a note on why these processes exist is because, we had people that were trained with us for years, man. Like, the gym opened in 2011 and we have clients that have been there ever since. And you get to the point where it's like, well, you think you're doing the right thing for the person, or you think you're meeting their needs. And it's like, well, why don't we just ask them? And so a few years ago, we figured out these processes, and it's really, really worked to help our people have an active part in the process, but also to make sure that we're doing our jobs to the best of our ability. So, the end of block chat is it takes on a longer time frame. And we lead people into the process that way because, goal setting, visioning, setting up action plans, all these things it's a skill. And I think the more complexity you have, the more difficult it is. And a greater time span equals more complexity. So we start short, and we can talk about gabbing too, one of the techniques that we use for planning for the day. But we start short with things like gabbing. We can work through a day, then we can work through a program, which is about 4 to 6 weeks. And then once we do that 4 times, we have some reps in at doing some planning, some visioning, some goal setting. And now we're going to project out for an even longer period. And as we do that, we look at the next 4 to 6 months to the next year and break that down into programs. And we have them, what is that going to look like? What could the goals be based on what you want that to look like? How do you want us to help you? How are we going to take action on these things? And then we take that, and all that information is put into the top of their program, and they can see it. So every day it's reflected back at them when they come in and they look at their program. And then we continue that cycle on for as long as they are a client. So, we gab, we do the end of phase chat, we do the end of block chat, and we continue, and it goes on and on and on. And it helps us help them evolve and really look at what they're doing and take stock and really act towards something that's meaningful to them.
Yeah, I love that. You're staying connected. You're staying engaged with them, because we even have, for the business of fitness segment today, I think today we have Alwyn on talking about this idea about I always say there's so many marketing programs, but there's not enough how to keep the people in there. You have to keep people there, retention.
Sure.
And we talk about that in culture, and he talks about his, kind of working with different teams, like a powerlifting team and a running team and a obstacle course racing team, and get people involved in these different things throughout their gym. Anyway, I love that, with these chats that you're able, and you're redoing the goals, because a lot of times people could just get complacent and they plateau, and then they're just sitting there and kind of doing the same thing. And if they're not intentional about it, they don't think about it and intentional and write this stuff down, they won't do it. And you guys are pushing them towards that. I love, though, this personal orientation session. I think too many people go from the one-on-one and the goal setting, which is great, but then they don't do that other kind of, you still have to ease them in. You can't just throw them into this group class where they're not getting any attention. I think too many places throw them right away into the bigger groups, and they don't kind of spend some time with them to teach them, hey, this is, do these 5 or 6 or 10 things. Let's see you do these things. Let's see how you do. Great. Cool. Then when they get in that class or the semi-private or the small group, they're gonna feel more comfortable because they had that personal orientation session with them. One of the things, like you said, I love that. The reason why I love let the first rep suck too is because what I used to tell people after my first session is I used to go over these, not 8 or 10 exercises, and I would give it to them in a PDF, or I had a website with those exercises on it. I'd say, please, just do me a favor. Just try these at home. You could do these the next 2 days, and then you're coming back to me on Thursday. Great. But try these. And they're like, well, what if I don't? I'm like, it's good. If you don't know how to do them, it's good. That's great. You have this self-guided learning. And then they come back in, and I show them a few corrections, and everything was good. But talk to me about this idea about the personal orientation session a little bit more. What exactly are you going over in that?
Yeah, well, I think the goal of it is comfort. I mean, we have a saying at our gym, and in Strength Faction, kill the tigers in the bushes. Because it's like when you're walking into a new environment, the first thing you're going to do is scan for what could potentially be dangerous to me. And that's mostly for folks socially and am I going to be accepted? But also it's what is going to be expected from me? How am I going to be can I feel competent in doing the things that are expected of me? And we want people to feel as though when they walk in on day one to do the program that's written for them, that sure, there's still going to be some unknowns, but we're squashing as many of those as we possibly can. And, the personal orientation session is that it's making sure that people are getting accustomed to where things are in the gym, which sounds, kind of elementary, but seriously, really being able to map the environment that way is super important. But also socially, they get introduced to all of our coaches. They get introduced to different clients. They get to move through the entirety of the gym. And it really helps them map out and feel comfortable in the space. But, from a technical standpoint, what we do is, we walk people through the hip hinge and we find the appropriate measure that's right for them. The goal for us is to try to get people to accomplish our strength standards as fast as possible so that they can move on to a more intense aspect of training. So that's one of the goals. It rarely happens during the personal orientation session, but we're always going to aim to try to get to the highest level in our progression and regression system that we can get people to. So one of our coaches is going to walk them through a hip hinge progression. So we're going to look at, okay, how do you look with the handcuff hinge? And we look at the history of the person coming into. So if it's somebody that's been training for a while and they I've deadlifted 300 pounds before, we're not going to just throw them into a kettlebell deadlift and be like, okay, this is where we're starting. We're going to try to figure out the hinge that works for them. But that's really the goal of it. So we look at the hinge. Okay, so where can we start with you that we can put an effective exercise into your program and learn how much volume and intensity you can handle? Same thing for a squat. What's going to be the right one for you? An upper body push and an upper body pull. And we walk through all of those. And then once we get through and we figure out, hey, this is the right variation for you, we give the folks a bit of a workout. So we take those variations that we found are going to work, and then we get them into a circuit and let them work through it so they feel like they got some work done, and then tag on a little conditioning at the end if it makes sense. Make sure they leave and get the warm-up reiterated to them, and we'll send them an email so they feel like when they come in the next time that they feel confident in that, because they're coming in, they have these exercises that they knew that they did, but they're also going to be coming in and looking at a program that they never had before. So they're going to have to learn how to read that. They're going to have somebody walking through them. And we do all of that during Chris's consultation, the one-on-one goal setting and assessment, and then also some during the personal orientation. But still, it's okay, here's this whole new thing that I have to comprehend. So we want them to feel like they got something when they come in, or at least are getting close to it, because the only way that we can get people to stretch themselves that we want to is to make them feel competent and safe and effective in some way so that they feel as though they can relax and stretch themselves.
Yeah. And I want people to understand this isn't, I know you work with people over 35, mostly at Beyond Strength, but this is the same thing with athletes. They're the same people. They're scared. Not all athletes are elite athletes. So the kids that are coming in, or even if it's high school or even college kids, they're not always that comfortable in the gym. They might not be that strong, and they might feel a little bit self-conscious too. So this is not just for the older folks.
No, I mean it's everybody. It's human, man. These are the things that everybody works through. It's we want to know that we're accepted. We want to know what we need to do to get through the environment. And once we do those things, then we can start to kind of flourish. I mean, one of the things that I think autonomy's been ever since self-determination theory got popular in our industry, autonomy, things like a community. These are a community, they're buzzwords in our industry, but it's no one really takes the time to understand how to make all of those things flourish. And it's like, it takes a certain level of like competency to feel and feeling connected to other people before people are comfortable to say, okay, I want to take some more of the reins on this, and I want to see how I can direct myself down the path.
Absolutely. I love the end of phase chat. Talk to me about you, because you said after the session, I want to make sure it's after that whole phase is done, they answer those questions on the back of their program, right?
Yeah. So it'll be, when they're coming in that day, we have a system. So we still do all of our stuff on paper and with clipboards. So our system is when the client needs to pay attention to something and our coaches need to pay attention to something so it doesn't get missed, we stand the clipboard up instead of laying it down on the windowsill. So it's standing up. They see, hey, one of our coaches will catch them. Hey, you're finishing a phase today. So when you finish, you're going to fill out the back. You and I have a quick chat. And then that way we know what to do to update your next program. And it's really simple, man. It's just like, we wanted to make sure that like we're on the same page with people. Like, hey, do you think things went well? No, why not? I mean, a lot of times if someone's going to say no, there's going to be extraneous reasons that are maybe outside the gym. But if we don't get in front of that, they could think it's because of something in the gym, which is, I mean, certainly a little bit self-protective for us, but it's also for them to really understand and take full scope of like how everything affects everything else. So, we want to make sure that we're on the same page about that. We want to know what they liked, what went well this time, were there certain exercises that you enjoyed? And one of the things that, we always talk about, and Chris says very well, is, we're not married to anything other than what's going to work for that person. Now, obviously we have program design principles that we don't break, but within the confines of what we do, we're not just going to try to force feed something to somebody, because it's like, you mentioned earlier about keeping people there. Like, well, the biggest source of accountability is somebody actually wanting to be in the gym. And if you're just forcing miserable shit down someone's throat that they don't actually like and don't want to do and can't connect to what they're trying to accomplish, then they're just going to stop coming. So we want to make sure that we get that out. And it's like, okay, so as we do that, if it's during their first 4 programs, we look at some of the goals that they might have talked about with Chris that are on top of their form. It's like, okay, so we're still working towards these. How would you like to do that? Do you feel like what we did just did that? Okay, so what would be the next step? And we have a conversation about that. And the thing about it is like, I think a lot of people push to make a goal very clear up front, but people just aren't there yet. They need context, they need reps before that stuff starts to clear up for them. And this is a process to help them start to get clear, because they just don't know what they can do in that environment yet. They're not sure of what's possible. And this is starting to lead them down the path of like, okay, this is what is possible. They're learning this. They've been introduced to this. Like, this seems exciting. I actually saw that I could lose a few pounds. Maybe I would like to do this thing. And it starts to open them up to that. And, we've worked a lot on, being able to ask good questions, being able to reflect, a lot of the motivational interviewing skills that a lot of folks are talking about. It's like, well, we've gone really deep on that, and our coaches have gotten good at it. So they ask really good open-ended questions. They get clarification on anything that the client might have written, and they make sure that everything's on the same page and everything's in agreement. And then from there, they take a picture of each side of the sheet. So we have tracking for the program. So what happened on the front, which would be where their program actually is, what happened on the back, which is what they wrote and the result of the conversation. And then we have a group text thread for our program design, and they send it off into that thread with some notes. So we're all on the same page. We know what's going on. And then whoever's going to write their program can go out and get after it. So it's been hugely beneficial for us, both from the clients feeling like they're heard, like they have input, and then just expectations and clarity. I think it's been huge for all of those reasons. Yeah.
Really quick, what's the structure in your gym in terms of, because you're talking about, like, some people might be like thinking, oh man, I don't have time for all this. I got, if somebody's coming in at 9, it's their end of program and I got to do a chat with them. How am I going to do that? Because then I have what you have a program designer, you have trainers. Talk to us about the structure of your organization at Beyond Strength.
Yeah. So there's Chris and I that are the owners. And he and I don't do as much coaching anymore. I still have some floor hours. I coach Ryan, obviously, and I'll still fill in with some of the guys sometimes. But we have 3 coaches that work for us, and they run most of the coaching hours now. And so we usually have, at least, unless it's dictated that it's a slower hour, like our 5 a.m. hour, we only have 1 coach on the floor. But starting it from 6 on, there's usually 2 coaches on the floor. So while one coach can watch the floor, the other coach can be handling things like the re-FMS screens and doing these end of block chats and end of phase chats and all those kind of things. So we have a team that allows us to do this. That it's really helpful. I mean, some of the other ways that people have implemented this is, from some of our folks from Strig Faction is, they do the chats and they just make sure that, obviously you have to keep numbers on the floor, but also via just having them fill it out and then asking any questions they might need to ask during text or an email or something like that. So there's multiple ways to get it done. We just happen to have the manpower to be able to do it this way.
Yeah. Talk to me about motivational interviewing, and you're talking about Gab, which is a technique you use for motivational interviewing. Go over that.
Yeah, sure. So I read the original motivational interviewing textbook a while back. I think either while I was in college or right after I graduated college, and I won't recommend that to anybody. It's brutal. But Motivational Interviewing in Nutrition and Fitness is a really, really good book. And basically it's just, helping people talk themselves into the change that they're ready and willing to do. And it's a lot of reflections, open-ended questions, affirming the good things and getting on the same page with people conversationally through all of that. But one of the biggest things that we directly stole from that is the Gab Technique, which is goals, assessments, and barriers. So in the book, it's presented a little bit more clinically, like at the end of like a nutrition consultation or a fitness consultation session. It's designed to help the person give themselves a focus during the interim when they're not seeing their coach. But we were looking at at one point, we needed to give something to our clients so that they could have more focus and more ownership over their training session. And I also wanted them to more frequently have the ability to work on the skill of goal setting and taking action on that goal setting. Because it's like, you need reps, man. So you need the reps to say, okay, I'm going to go do this. Here's how I'm going to take action. And then you can see the outcome. And the more that you can do that, the better people get at it, and the more they trust themselves to set goals. So if you can work with the smallest time frame that we have, which is like our sessions range from 60 to 75 minutes, we can work on that. We can set our sights on something, devise a plan, take action. And then, our clients, we want our coaches doing that at least with 2 clients per hour. So if we do that with 2 clients per hour throughout the week, we catch everyone. And the goal is to get them to internalize that process so they can start to, not only do it in the gym and are able to project themselves farther into the future, but also that they can take that into other parts of their lives. Because, a lot of times people just aren't asked to set goals that way anymore. And they just don't think about it. So it's a skill to be cultivated. So we have folks, when they come in, they grab their program, and on the back, we have our subjective rating questionnaire. So it's like your sleep, your nutrition, your soreness, your fatigue, if you have any pain, and you rate all of that. And as soon as you're done with that, they got to take it over to a coach, and a coach checks in with that. If there's anything they need to ask questions about, they will. And then from there, that's when they do their Gab session. So it's like they flip it over. It's like, all right, cool. So, looking at your program today, is there anything that you want to accomplish specifically? And then, they walk through that process. The client might be like, okay, well, looking at what their bigger goals are, it might reflect on that. Or like, hey, you know what? My squats felt kind of wonky last week. I couldn't quite figure out where I needed my feet. I think I'd like to focus on that today. All right, cool. So we want to look at squats. How confident do you feel like you can get to that? Like, get your feet in the right place, scale of 1 to 10. And they'll say, if they're 8 or above, it's probably a good thing for us to focus on. If it's 7 or below, it might not be. So let's say somebody says 8. And we say, great. So you feel pretty good about that, but you're not a 10. So what made you choose 8 and not 7 and not an 8 and not 10? Well, I feel as though, I'm not that far off, but I'm just not quite sure what to do. So I just need a little bit of guidance. Okay. So what do you think could get in the way of us, getting this done today? And I'll say, I don't know, maybe just my focus or, making sure that I let you know when I'm ready to need help or anything like that. And then we walk through this process. So they have an aim. They know specifically their biggest value for the day. Obviously they're going to go through everything else in their program and train, but they know specifically, this is the big thing that I want to accomplish. They can aim at it. They just work through a very short-term plan on how they might get it done. And now we know from a coaching standpoint, specifically what need they want us to help them meet. So everybody's on the same page. They have a direction, and we're all going at it together.
I love it. It really kind of narrows the focus as well within that session. I love that.
Yeah, man.
Let's talk about, and like, I'll remind everybody, this is all in the book, and he goes over all these different examples and dialogue as well. So 3 main reasons people hire a fitness coach. This is really good. This is really insightful. Talk to us about this.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, you know, I feel as though the reason that I wanted to write this out is it's something that I thought about for years. And it's like, you know, there's a million reasons. There's a million ways for someone to take care of their fitness goals or whatever it is, or change their body, or, you know, change their mind. There's a million ways. Why would someone seek out a coach? So I thought and wrote, and it came down. I was like, man, I really think it's as simple as 3 things. I feel like it's competency. Either they want to feel competent, so they're outsourcing it to us, or they want to learn so they can feel competent and empowered and go take on, you know, the environment themselves. And you know, that's our goal for our clients, is like, hey, we want them to feel so competent that they don't need us anymore, but they stay around because they know that this place is good for them, and that it'll further help them evolve in whatever journey they want to take through this. But I think the really big, you know, that's a really big personal reason for them. But I think also, you know, why anybody does anything like this, to train, to do anything for any kind of self-improvement, is they want to change their self-perception. So they're coming to us for some reason because they can transform, they'll look at themselves differently, and their life will be fuller. Whether that's just taking on a challenge, whether that's, you know, changing the way that their body looks, whatever it is, people want to feel as good about themselves as they possibly can. And when they seek out our help, they want to look at themselves in a different way. And, you know, the third big reason is just they want to connect to people. Because if it wasn't about human connection, they wouldn't seek out a trainer, right? Because it's like they want to take the competency from us, but they also want to feel as though they're connected to the person, that they like the person that they're working with, and the whole package kind of fits together. And I felt like outlining that is big, because if we can understand the reasons why people are seeking us out from like that more general level, I think it's easier to help them, because we can see, okay, we know this person. How does this person want to interact with the whatever level of competence that they have? Are they really trying to outsource it from us? Are they really going to rely on us for it? Or are they trying to extract it so they can move forward? And when we can look at things with a frame like that, it helps us better just to interact with the person, and knowing that, like, hey, everyone is here because they want to change the way that they look at themselves in some way. And we all want to do that. We do it in different ways. It's like, you know, it becomes a different part of your identity. You know, just if you want to go learn how to golf, or you want to go learn how to, you know, play the guitar, or whatever it is, you're doing this for a reason, so that, you know, you enjoy your life, and just enjoying that process of being involved in something and learning is valuable and good in and of itself. But at the end of that, you're someone that knows how to golf, and taking on that new identity is important for people. So I just felt like if we could outline that, if we could really understand it, it helps us interact with people, and it helps us put them in a better position to be successful from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the whole start with why pendulum, we've gotten so caught up in our own why. And this is such a great idea to understand your consumers' why, because that's why, you know, why they're coming. It's going to help you kind of get them to where they want to go. Obviously, we talked about the lifestyle of the client. You're finding those things out, but to understand these things as well, it does help you in coaching. And I think it's nice to hear more about the human connection, because I think a lot of people are worried that they're going to lose people to, you know, all the apps. And we obviously have Train Heroic as one of our sponsors on here, and they do a segment, but it's not just about that, because I use that app with my clients that come in. So It's not just about that. There is that human connection. And I think it's probably one of the most important parts that, you know, it's why we need to keep focusing on what they want, and kind of keep talking to people, and kind of keep them engaged.
Yeah. Well, within all of that, I mean, each person has the most valuable thing to them, right? And whether it's like coming into because I want to feel competent, whether it's coming in because, you know, I know if I do these things and I change, I'm going to feel better about myself. Or if it's the human connection piece, like we literally, I mean, I think it was last year, the year before, we had a client that found us, you know, looking through social media, getting onto our website, and saw that, like, wow, these folks actually have a real community of people. And this fellow was new to the area. And not only did he want to lift and change his body because he enjoyed that, but he was like, you know what, I really want to have a community. He's like, I don't have that here. And I feel like I would find that in your gym. And it really drove him to sign up with us because, you know, we live in Loudoun County, Virginia. Like, it is the wealthiest county in the country right now. And people have 1.5 million fitness options in our county. And so for people that are seeking that, to be able to provide it for them, not only is it a differentiator for us from a business standpoint, but it's just like, if you know that's the highest value for someone and you can meet them there, you can help guide them towards the path to all the other things that are going to be the holistic transformation that they're looking for.
So true. I live in a pretty wealthy county as well in New York, Westchester County, and we have 1 million golf courses, and my facility was called 5 Iron Fitness. And it was hard from one perspective, the thought process of that third space, that Starbucks third space, right?
Sure.
There's home, there's work, and we want to provide a third space. Well, the problem with when you're working with golfers is that they pay a lot of money every year to have another third space. It's called a country club.
Right.
And so really I'm battling for the fourth space. And so you had to think of other ways to do that and to kind of almost can't beat them, join them, kind of become the 3.5 space. Like I was almost like a mini country club in my facility. And someone had remarked about like, well, it doesn't really look like the typical gym. And I said, thank you. Actually, because when they walk in, I don't want them to feel like they're in that gym. I even, the kid that I sold the gym to ended up knocking this wall down that made it look more open. I could have had that wall knocked down, but I didn't want it because I didn't want people walking into this huge room. I actually had to build a changing room right as you walk in so people didn't have to walk, when they first come in, into like they see all these people working out and feel, oh God, what's going on here? They eased into it. Even the rug that I had in the room was more. It made it feel a little bit. I had a lot of golf paraphernalia, so they almost felt a little bit more like it was like that country club feel when they first walked in, because I felt like I needed to make them feel comfortable when they walked in.
Yeah. People need to feel understood, man. I think that's the one of the main factors of getting people to join your gym and want to stay around is just that, when they see what you put out into the world, they don't think like, I don't think people first think, wow, they can solve my problem. First, they think, what does this look like? Will these people understand me? And I'll tell you an example. Chris did a consultation with a lady that wasn't a good fit for us a few weeks back, maybe a month and a half ago. And, in the consultation, Chris was just honest. He's like, listen, you're driving all over the place. It sounds like you have a lot of reasons why being here might not be the best idea for you. He's like, why don't we help you find another gym? And the reason she showed up at our gym is like, she lives in one part of Virginia. She drives the whole way to Maryland for work and was going to try to come train at our gym. And Chris was like, I just don't think this is going to work. Let's see if we can find a gym closer to you. And she was like, well, I wanted to train here because when I saw your website, it just spoke to me. It's like, I saw myself there. I see myself in the people. And he went to try to find her another gym. And we found this facility of folks that we know are pretty decent coaches that were closer to her. And she saw their website and she literally like had a physical reaction. She started backing away from the computer. She's like, no, that's scary. And seriously, and really, it was these pictures on there of like these glistening, sweating, ripped bodies. And it was this normal, middle-aged woman, and she's like, I can't train there, no way. And so I think your story of saying you had the golf clubs, you had everything up front. It's like it's a homier feel. It's an environment that they understand, they feel welcome in, and they get. And to have that as a lead-in, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Let's talk about. You break this down now into the book into these 3 parts too. Mm-hmm. The 3 pillars of fitness coaching. Go over those.
Yeah, so psychological safety, guidance, and aims and goals. And let the first rep suck is part of the psychological safety piece. Is like one of the statements that I make is kind of contradictory to that at the beginning of that chapter. Is that the gym isn't a safe place, and when I say that, I mean it existentially. People are coming to us to make a grandiose change in their life, or at least to make a change in their life. And that's not safe, man. Like, that's scary. So we need to do everything we can to make the environment stable, safe, accepting, and take all of the other potential threats off of the table. So people feel as though I can come in here, I can go after the things I want, and I feel good about who's helping me do it. And, it comes a lot from, I don't know if you're familiar with Carl Rogers. He was a humanistic psychologist. He's like the father of humanistic psychology. And I learned about him, I think first during one of my freshman college psychology classes. My undergrad's in psychology. And, ever since then, I was like, man, this guy's one of my heroes. And one of his concepts is unconditional positive regard. And it's really just basically seeing the humanity in yourself, so you see the humanity in another person. And that level of acceptance of each other allows you guys to get to the truth and be honest with each other. And you can't do anything without people being honest with each other. But that unconditional positive regard is also a level of social acceptance, which makes it safe. And people relax. They'll tell you the truth. You guys can help each other. And one of the things that I saw a lot in my career leading up to now, and listen, I'm not on a high horse, that I've certainly been guilty of as well, is making corrections on people too fast. And you say somebody's deadlifting or squatting, they're set up wrong. Wait, no. Or they go and do a rep, and you just, as soon as they start to do something, you jump into the correction. And in most instances, people aren't going to get hurt. They're going to be fine. And now if it's a dangerous situation, I think, that's a different story. But for the most instance, everybody's fine. Just let them take a swing. And I think it's that swing that's so important because, first of all, they need context between what good is and what bad is. And if they never really get to be able to live on each end of the pendulum, it's going to be hard for them to really put the whole picture together. So sometimes it's okay to do something so people can feel what wrong is like. And I think that the bigger part of that is that we need people to feel as though they're safe to take risks. And when I say risks, I mean stretch themselves towards goals, to try new exercises, to try something that seems a little bit scary to them. And if we're overbearing in our corrections, and every time they try to do something, we jump in, they're not going to feel that level of safety to feel like, okay, I can stretch myself. I can go after something here. They're just not going to feel that. Or if they do, it's going to be hindered. For some people, depending on personality, it might not make a difference. But I think for the most part, the folks that are coming to see us, they're not like us. Like for us, it's different. We sought this out. We went after this lifestyle in a different way. So it's like we approach it differently. These folks need a little bit different of an environment for that. So I think that's really the biggest thing is, making folks feel as though they are safe enough to stretch themselves, and psychological safety in your environment, both interpersonally, which making sure that everybody's on the same page, and then physically, people being able to navigate the environment. It makes sense taking all the things off the table that you can. Like, it's going to sound crazy, but almost everything in our gym is symmetrical, because that symmetry just saves people mental energy. They don't have to figure stuff out. Like, it's just everything kind of flows. It makes sense. And making sure that the interpersonal environment is easy to navigate, the physical environment is easy to navigate, and people move better through the facility, and they just are able to relax better. So, I mean, that's the biggest piece about the psychological safety. From there, it's guidance. And I think really for that, it's, I think there's two things here that I was really trying to accomplish. And that's really for people to understand, or coaches to understand, that we're not the hero and we need to get past hammer and nail syndrome. Our clients are the hero. We're like the Obi-Wan, they're Luke. And we need to get ourselves in the mindset of like, hey, we need to create the structures and be able to ask the questions that help people guide themselves down the path, while at the same time making sure that we don't jump down the hammer and nail syndrome that we're so good at. So like a few years ago, after seeing a few people, actually probably 5 or 6 years ago, after seeing a few people talk, reading some books, going back through some of the literature, I put together a coaching paradigm. And the first level of that is find the bright spots first. So, people want to be acknowledged. They want to feel as though they're seen, and also that they're doing something well. And if we do that, they let us get into the guiding them part and being able to put them in a better position to be successful. So, that whole kind of chapter is based on that coaching paradigm. And then we go into different things with like the depth of cues, the different types of cues, how maybe to use these cues in certain situations with certain people, and really allow us to be in the position where we're not just thinking as a hammer and nail, and we're not thinking that we're the hero here that's saving this person that needs our help. People are capable. People can do this. They're coming to us to outsource some competence and gain some understanding so that they can go and do things for themselves, and really pushing them towards that autonomy, that feeling of competence so that they can do that. And then the third piece is our aims and goals. Like, we need to help people figure out how to do that. And we talked about that process that we used, a little bit earlier in this conversation. But I think the biggest thing is people just need structure to do it. And we've come up with, it's not the end all be all, but we came up with a structure that works pretty well for people, for them to be able to examine what it is that they might want, figure out what they're ready, willing, and able to do, the term that we all know, and then go ahead and act on that. And when we can create an environment where people feel psychologically safe, they feel supported by a guide, and that they have something to aim at and something to go after, man, they can change their entire life. And that's really just, the original title for the book was The 3 Pillars of Fitness Coaching. And I said that to Chris, and he's like, that sucks. He's like, you need something better than that. But that's it. That's what we do. That is what we do.
Absolutely love it. And I think you're right. The thing with the goals is it is a skill, and the more you do it, that's why I love your process. Is the more you do it, you're getting better at it, the client's getting better at it, your things are coming out, those layers are peeling back, and you're finding more stuff out. Because I say to people all the time, is you can't, don't worry, just do this exercise every day for a week, and then do it every month, because what I'm talking about, like goal setting or mission stuff.
Sure.
Because it's going to change. Your world is changing all the time, and you're learning more about yourself. So I love the direction that you guys have gone on this. So I'll remind everybody, let the first rep suck. If you buy this book, just get the book now so the money can go to Ryan and the great cause and help him hopefully get better. And it's on Amazon. Mm-hmm. I will have links for that as well. You've done a great job with this book, but before we finish, I do want you to give us just your elevator type pitch for the Strength Faction. I think you're doing some great work with people. I know when I was doing some stuff with Chris Cooper and Kirk Adams, they both had nothing but great things to say about the Strength Faction, and I love the balance that you're creating for this industry. One of my goals is to help fitness professionals become successful and make an impact in the world, and I think exactly what you're doing and helping them with, creating that balance is really going to help us keep so many more people in this industry. So give us the elevator pitch for Strength Faction.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, it's the same goal. You just said our goal. And really ours is to show folks how to create a sustainable career in fitness and live the life that they want while they do it. Because I think that the first thing people start to butt up against that, how do I solve all of these problems? And they just don't have the systems to do it. And then they give up on their self-care. We help people develop the systems for program design, coaching, and building their business while also helping them take better care of themselves in a community of folks from all over the world that are solving the same problems as they are. So we just teach people how to make this a career, and we do it via a great community, lessons and coaching from folks that are still doing it and are in the trenches making it happen.
I also love you have like a buddy system too, right?
Yeah. So the biggest thing with Strength Faction is, like, we always think, like, man, we have great content. We're teaching people great stuff, and people go use it, and it's awesome. And we've seen people literally, transform their entire careers by using the information that we teach them. But the cool thing is like, people don't stick around for that. They stick around because they have a community of people. So we have, we just took Dan Don's idea of intentional community, and we applied it in an online format. We have a horizontal axis of folks like connecting on the peer level. And then we have a mentorship and a coaching axis that goes up the chain, and people are connected in a really cool web of folks and support. So like, we have an accountability buddy system that just, we pair people up that have like interests or are working in the same thing, or maybe one person's down the path a little bit farther, and we connect them so they can take care of themselves. But also each new member is assigned to a mentor, and that's somebody that's been successful in their own right in the industry and in Strength Faction, and they help guide them through the process. And then Chris, Mike, and I, the owners, are always there for coaching for coaching calls and to help guide people through the process as well. So it's been a really cool way to see how the connection has kind of shuffled out and really helped a lot of people.
Very cool. You're doing some great work, Todd, and we really appreciate you coming on here talking about Let the First Rep Suck and a little bit of strength action. So thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, man. Thank you. The pleasure is mine. I really appreciate the opportunity, Anthony.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 275 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Remember, you can try strengthcoach.com out for 3 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every single day. To access that offer, go to strengthcoach.com, click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. All right, special thanks to Chris Poirier and the folks over at Perform Better. Right now at Perform Better, there is free online shipping, no minimum order. Don't forget the one-day seminars. The next one, Austin, Texas, February 22nd. Followed by Orlando, Boston, and Chicago. Go to performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Todd Bumgardner for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength and conditioning and performance enhancement and coaching. Don't forget, get Todd's book, Let the First Rep Suck. It's going to a good cause, and it's a great book. Thanks to Adam Doughty, Tim Robinson, and Train Heroic. Head over to trainheroic.com to start your free 14-day trial. Let them know I sent you. You'll save 10% off the first year of the Train Heroic Pro or Elite Edition. Alwyn Cosgrove for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Lee Burton and Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. Josh Henkin and DVRT Systems. Check them out at dvrtfitness.com. My name's Anthony Renna. My book, Be Like the Best, consists of 50 interviews with top fitness pros, and after each interview is a Be Like, an action step or a challenge that'll help you be like the best. I also have the Be Like the Best workbook, which is basically a collection of all those Be Likes with just room for notes. Go to belikethebest.com or my site, continuefit.com. for more information. That's going to do it. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.